because the skills that it takes to be a farmer are completely transferable and usable within the charity environment. I also talk to businesses about this to say, yes, you can make a donation to a charity, and that is really valuable, and every charity in the country effectively will need capital to do the work that you are connected to. But they also need great people who are project managers, who can think through seasonal adjusted investments in resources, resource allocation, finances, accessing procurement opportunities. Like and I'm not even really thinking through it, but if you had an hour, you would list 25 skills that a farmer has who works in Wagga or who owns a dairy farm in Colac that is completely transferable to a community organisation because they do them every single day. This idea of skill asset volunteerism is a highly underutilised asset. Whilst money and capital are good, skills and resources are incredibly finite and should be accessed where we can.
Welcome to the Profitable Farmer podcast, where we share stories and tips to help you run a better farming business and create your very own freedom farm. If you're looking to work smarter and not harder in your farm business, welcome. You're in the right place. G'day everyone. I hope this finds you incredibly well. In this episode, I feel like Sam McGuane is almost family, but my brother is married to Sally. Sally's sister is Sophie. Sophie is married to Sam, and they've got 3 amazing boys. So I feel like Sam is family. We've been wanting to have this conversation for some time, and it was a real pleasure, Sam, to connect and share your story, but also what you're doing to make a major impact to just how efficiently we solve the problem of brain cancer globally. Just to introduce Sam McGuane, who is CEO of the Brain Cancer Centre and Director and General Manager of Carrie's Beanies for Brain Cancer Foundation. An amazing human. So Sam is a passionate strategic leader whose personal motto is to always be in the service of others. For the last 10 years, Sam has held several major senior strategic positions with the Cotton On Group, including major global community initiatives and leading the development of innovative sporting partnerships within the AFL and NRL, delivering powerful outcomes for customers and communities globally. Sam is now Director and General Manager to Carrie's Beanies for Brain Cancer Foundation, and Sam leads the strategy, governance, finance, and general operations of this charity. His role in the foundation has enabled Sam to develop a strong network across the Brain Cancer Foundation and fundraising community, and in partnering with WEHI, has fostered his desire to accelerate brain cancer research efforts for the betterment of all. As the CEO to the Brain Cancer Centre, Sam is energised about making a real difference to patients and their families and to help end brain cancer as a terminal illness. I don't know that Sam needs much more of an introduction, but he met Carrie Bickmore some time ago, and what they, with their team, have created since is truly inspiring. So I encourage you to check out Carrie's Beanies for Brain Cancer Foundation site and get around them and support them. But Sam, wonderful to connect. Thank you for your openness and your honesty and for sharing as always. Just wonderful to connect. So we've had a few attempts at making this conversation happen. I've been looking forward to this conversation for years. And Sam, it is just cracking to have you part of our podcast. Welcome to Profitable Farmer.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And we've known each other for a long time, and I'm sure we'll share with the listeners those connections. But every time we've spoken over, it must be 10 or 12 years now, I leave our conversations with just a little bit of optimism. You know, this sense of the world's actually okay. I don't know if I've ever shared that with you, but you have some energy that's pretty unique. And so when we started talking about this, it must be a couple of years ago. If this happens, it'll be a pretty special conversation. Now, thankfully, it was always going to happen. We had a couple of little false starts, but we're here, and I'm really looking forward to it, mate. And I love what you guys have built around agriculture and sharing this idea of how do we do it better together. You know, that idea it's awesome.
Thanks, mate. And likewise, so much respect for the way you navigate life and charity and business and family. And yeah, just can't wait to lean into this conversation. To kick us off, Sam, what is your connection to agriculture and rural communities?
Well, it runs deep. I feel like I've still got, you know, the Western Districts of Victoria soil running through my veins. So we grew up as a family of 12, no less than 12 siblings on a dairy farm in southwest Victoria, a place called Bungadore, which no one will know unless they've been heading down towards the coast, towards a place like Simpson or Portland or somewhere down towards the 12 Apostles. It's wedged in there as dairy farming heartland, south of the Princes Highway, and just had this incredible upbringing as most do. And I look back now, and I've got 3 boys, and we live in town, and it will never feel right for me to live next door to my neighbours, to see the edge of a car or the edge of a house. It's in my DNA to see space and to see the positivity in wet ground and and the positivity in a hot sun for harvest, or the necessary parts of the daily grind of dairy, or the ups and downs of the milk price and the calving seasons, things like that. It just feels like it's far too ingrained in me ever to leave me. So we spent 20 years on the farm, my mother and father having worked incredibly hard to bring up 12 children, as I said, and then eventually my father was diagnosed with a disease, and we were trying to kind of come up with ways that some of the family could jump in, and thankfully a couple of older brothers really shouldered a huge burden there for the family while we worked out what the transition was, and we were able to make sure that we exited farm life, and we were able to set mum in a position where she could enjoy whatever the next phase was. So no, really, and still really very much involved. I was at my brother's place yesterday, who owns a really significant ag machinery business, and just love being around tractors and toys, those sorts of things. Jeb.
Sam, I know you're a really close family still. Where did you fit into sibling order, and what was it like growing up in a family with 12 kids and, farm, and how do you reflect on that?
It has changed. The reflection, so in 2 parts. The reflection has changed over time, because I'm not sure there's that many 13-year-old boys who love the fact that their father will press them to milk cows in the morning before they catch the bus. Now I look back on that and think what a privilege to have grown up in that environment with that level of responsibility, but also that level of freedom and autonomy that it's not afforded to kids holistically, given the way we are connected to everything at the moment, but just in terms of space and opportunity for adventure and curiosity and safety. It's just such a privilege to grow up on a dairy farm with effectively, by virtue of numbers, effectively a small community. We could have carved off the mafia element and the naughty element and the academic element. We had it all happening within, our house. We were such a big group of people. And I'm number 10 of 12, so 7 boys, 5 girls. Incredible gift that my mother was incredibly healthy and well through all of that period of time. My mother and father accepted these gifts, in a Roman Catholic family, that gift from God, and willingly, and did whatever it took to ensure that we were well fed, clothed, at school, church on Sundays, with full hearts and most of the time very full bellies, and life was simple, which I also reflect on really positively as well. So it was just an absolute privilege. I'd be on the land again in a heartbeat if we could. That's how much I miss it, and that's how much I now think about what a special upbringing that was.
Thank you, mate. So we'll talk more about your career and I guess the impact you're having more recently, but how has growing up on farm and in a rural community kind of shaped you and even kind of underpinned how you go about what you do today?
Oh, that's such a good question, because people might be surprised with the answer that you could link national charity and medical research and this altruistic idea of progress on brain cancer, which is my world now, to an upbringing on a small 120 cow dairy farm in Western Victoria. But they are almost exactly the same for lots of different reasons in that, and I imagine this is similar to some of your listeners' experiences, but small dairy farms in Western Victoria are effectively small businesses, but they rely on each other heavily. They rely on the next door neighbour who's got the tractor that can do the thing that you don't need all the time, but you can share it around. And there's this quid pro quo, scratch your back, scratch my back. It's all good, swings and roundabouts, that kind of mentality of the way in which farmers connect together. And it's that sense of community, because even though farmers are effectively running their own business, it's a solo enterprise built to be your part of the market, if you want, and you're supposed to grow your part of the market. It's supposed to be, how do you build your silo? When in reality, we need every other farmer around us to help us, whether that's with, the milk run and, having access to factories, or whether it's with machinery. And one of the things that I still take with me today is this idea of acts of service for other people. And that is when, if I'm thinking about things in that way, in the work that I do now, that's when I'm at my best. And I've done some personal purpose work that has allowed me to kind of frame that for myself. And so if I'm in the acts of service, I'm doing what is required of me to be at my best, even if that's in a finance conversation with an institute in Perth. If I'm trying to help them, if I'm thinking about ways in which I can leverage their asset or connect them to different funding, that's when I'm at my best. And that comes from the fact that my dad would never have described this, but his acts of service model was based in gratitude and this appreciation for what others had and how that helped him. And really simple examples of if my dad borrowed a plough from the next door neighbour, it went home greased, it went home clean, it went home better than it turned up at our place, even though it had done 40 hours or 50 hours or 100 hours work those 2 weeks. If he borrowed a tractor from someone, it went home full of fuel, even if it came in and it was empty. But there was that sense of gratitude and the fact that someone had taken time out, or he had the relationship with which to call on for support. It's just extraordinary. We've known each other for a little while, so probably that I'm an emotional mess, and when I talk about my father, I can't help it. But he was such a good man, worked so hard for so long, and I think about the effort it must have taken to step out and say, no, this goes home better than it turned up, even though all of the pressure he had on him around 12 children and a mortgage and interest rates at 15% in the 80s, things. The amount of effort it must have taken for him to still capture that moment of gratitude and service it'll be with me forever.
The little things can be the big things, right, mate? Thanks for sharing. I'm going to ask you another question about your dad, if I could, is how do you remember him? What do you most glean from how he did farming and did life?
Yeah. So there's two phases to this. One, I have a quote in my office here that will probably resonate with you and probably lots of other people, but it's Theodore Roosevelt's Man in the Arena, as taken from the excerpt of his Citizenship in a Republic speech. But that man in the arena, for me, and interpret it whatever way you will, but that effectively talks about effort. For me, it is not the critic who counts. It's not the doer of it's the doer of deeds. It's the person in the arena. It's dust, mud, sweat, blood, tears, all of those words that talk about effort for me. And so I think about my dad as a person with extraordinary resilience and extraordinary amounts of effort to both be calm and considerate as he was and faith-based as he was, to stay the course for as long as he did, to do the mornings and the nights and the carvings and the harvests and just to maintain this beautiful sense of how I remember him as calm, as unflappable in most senses, that it's still extraordinary to me that he was able to do that for as long as he did that. But then effort and his resilience probably reached a new level when he was diagnosed with the disease that eventually took his life, which was a disease called autonomic neuropathy, effectively a degenerative disease like MS. But he existed in a state of degeneration with incredible grace, and my mother as well. In that space, the effort that it took to see out the marriage vows, to sickness and health, and in that element of sickness to maintain the elegance and the contribution and the connection and the love and respect. The effort to stay in the fight for as long as he did was incredible. So that's how I remember him. And that's how I try to remember him with my boys. And when we talk about Pa, we talk about the work that he did and the hours and and the struggle and the commitment to something that wasn't just about growing wealth or, it was about faith, and faith can be many things. It doesn't have to be Sundays at church, but faith in something, and about working hard because your purpose is bigger than you. And so we talk about that as often as we can. I also say that my dad was much harder on me than I am on them, and he would have had me out in the morning, milking cows by the time these boys, could be turning on their Nintendo Switch. But he was a beautiful man with incredible amounts of resilience that I could only hope I can draw on at times when it gets really tough.
I've got no doubt that you do, Sam. And I guess the next question, given that you've kind of dedicated so much of your career to being in the service of others and solving significant and very selfless problems, what is it that drives you? And you mentioned purpose. What is behind why you have chosen to be in the service of others and to be supporting and leading significant charities?
Yeah, there is an element. It's almost a selfish element, if it could be described in without the negative connotation of selflessness. But I get so much from contributing to others. So the selfish part about being involved in charity for me is almost this sense of it gives me more than I take. And I try to contribute a lot, but I get this incredible sense of connection with people, of trying to help people, of thinking through these big problems in a way that can support and help an entire sector struggling to kind of make ground on this idea. It fills up a cup that I can't really describe, yet I know that it's there. I'm aware enough to know that when I'm operating in that service of others in the space of this charitable endeavour, which has grown organically over time. I thought I was going to play AFL footy, first of all. Then I thought I was going to work in, elite sporting environments, which is what I went to university for. So I didn't plan this out as if it was a linear progression. It fell on me over time through different opportunities. And because of those opportunities, I have learned, as we all do as we grow and become a bit wiser and maybe a little bit more aware, that's where my heart is. So I should pursue it in a way that then allows me to create a career out of this. And thankfully, those things, not without their trials and tribulations, of course, it's not all been smooth sailing, but thankfully those things have led me to this place now. But A, I get so much from making a contribution and thinking through these big problems on behalf of a group of people. And B, I just know that in the deepest, darkest parts of my heart that this is the thing that lights me up.
Amazing. I love the concept that entrepreneurship and business is actually all about being in the service of others and adding value. But I love the fact that joy in life can be when you're adding and improving the value of the lives of others without any expectation of return. And that's the point of life. And there's a ebook that I love and share with new team members in our business, The Habit of Going the Extra Mile. And it talks about that people flourish and progress in business and in careers and in entrepreneurship to the exact degree to which they go the extra mile without any expectation of return. And, getting to know you, Sam, every day and in every moment, I just see you going the extra mile for everyone you connect with, clearly without any expectation of return. And I can only imagine that that's probably been one of the secrets to your success over time and why you've just achieved so much.
Well, maybe, but that reflection probably can only come from the outside, because it's a hard thing for me to think, have I been going the extra mile, or am I just chasing the feeling of contributing or is that normal modus operandi for me? It's not, certainly not strategic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe the reality of being able to find something, an industry that I'm passionate about, and I'll relate this back to agriculture and farming in a second, but to find the industry that I'm passionate about and just do the thing, find the balance, find the joy, experience the heartache, which as humans we are meant to experience, the difficult times where, we're supposed to experience that. That's where our growth comes from. And then hopefully keep pushing through has been an absolute privilege. And I talk about, and people seem to kind of come to me for advice. I seem to do a lot of, career existential kind of crisis conversations over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, because I think people look at what I do and think charity is my panacea to solve the issues of my life. And in terms of I don't know where I'm heading in my career. I don't know if I'm happy. I don't know. I don't think, and I often talk to those people about, you don't have to work in charity to feel as though you're making a genuine contribution to the world. You can love what you do, and that is a genuine contribution, because I can promise you that if you love what you do, it doesn't necessarily mean a financial outcomes, but I bet you're a better husband, a better brother, a better community member, a better volunteer. You'll find ways to contribute to your community if you are invested in what you do. And maybe mine is in charity and where I've established a set of experiences. For others, it will be agriculture. It will be the love of farming, the passionate investment in their industry and sector. And because of that, they're a better community member. They're more likely to share. They've got better mental health. They're a better husband, a better parent, all of those things. It grows because you're invested in it.
Can I get your thoughts on this? My bias here has been, we grow commodities, crops, livestock, milk, whatever it is, and that as leaders of our businesses, we should also think beyond our farm gate and look to be leaders of community and contributing to charities and, contributing our skills beyond the making of crops and the making of profits for our family. Are you suggesting something different, that if we're passionate just about growing crops, that we should just do that knowing that we will have a positive impact on others because we're passionate about our day job, if that makes sense?
No, it makes complete sense, but I think we're talking about the same thing. I'm talking about it being an organic outcome of what you're doing, because then I think you are more likely to contribute to charity, to find a way to contribute to your community in a meaningful way. That is what we should do. Now, those two things may not go in a step change model. They might be, slightly rolling kind of strategies, because I think there's probably an element of someone, maybe this is where you're going, where someone who is not quite loving what they're doing or in a bit of a rut or feeling flat, and a strategy, a real tactic would be, you know what, you need to get your bum off the tractor and you need to go and volunteer at the local thing, because that's where you get your perspective. That would be a perfect piece of advice. My thing is, I think that's probably more an ebb and flow than it is a step change model, because I think about this in terms of business more broadly and the markets that we all access, and the businesses that I hope young people create in the future is about this conscious consumerism, social capital that will ensure that businesses that are created in the future are not just there for profit, but they have a locked-in constitutional requirement to contribute significantly, not just on the surface, to contribute to communities, whatever that is. It's not a marketing opportunity. It's not a market opportunity. It's not a customer acquisition opportunity. It's a locked-in part of our businesses. And I think young people that are now aware of some of the big problems of the world, or the regional problems of our worlds, will start to create businesses with that kind of mindset.
I guess what I'd reflect on as you're talking, Sam, is don't underestimate the importance of being on your A game as a human and as a leader, and also don't underestimate the impact that you can have on family and community and charity and other things for just being a farmer, in inverted commas.
Absolutely. Because the skills that it takes to be a farmer are completely transferable and usable within the charity environment. I also talk to businesses about this to say, yes, you can make a donation to a charity, and that is really valuable in every charity in the country effectively. will need capital to do the work that you are connected to. But they also need great people who are project managers, who can think through seasonal adjusted investments in resources, resource allocation, finances, accessing procurement opportunities. Like and I'm not even really thinking through it, but if you had an hour, you would list 25 skills that a farmer has who works in Wagga or who owns a dairy farm in Colac that is completely transferable to a community organisation because they do them every single day. This idea of skill asset volunteerism is a highly underutilised asset. Whilst money and capital are good, skills and resources are incredibly finite and should be accessed where we can.
And to your point, farmers are such generalists and so competent and capable across so many fields. We do underestimate the impact that skill set can bring to entities and organisations beyond the farm gate. Mate, thank you. I wasn't expecting to talk about this, but I'd love to. There's a concept out of Harvard Business School that I love. It's called created shared value. Have you heard of it?
No, but you can bet your bottom dollar I'll be Googling it after this.
I'm going to paraphrase. Porter kind of coined this, and it used to be that businesses were successful if they maximised shareholder returns, and that was maximising profit for the shareholders in the short term. But the reality there is that if businesses do that, something or someone has to lose. That if I'm a mining company and I'm maximising profit, that the environment or the culture of the company or the customer kind of gets smaller Pringles or whatever it is. Like, it's a win-lose game. But the new business today, because of social media, and I think what I understand is that governments and the conventional structures aren't necessarily going to solve our social problems, but businesses that go about what they do with a social intent, like Unilever, they're not about profit. Profit's an outcome of going after solving a social problem. And if you do that, then you attract people who are passionate about your cause, and you'll do the right thing by customers, and the environment can win. So that the new business is about businesses setting down a mandate to solve a social problem. And in the doing of that, instead of doing business win-lose, it's win for the community, it's win for the team member, it's win for the customer, it's win for the environment. And as an outcome, the shareholder wins.
Yeah.
And so, he talks about it, that this new way of approaching business leadership is the thing that's going to change the planet.
Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it. We used to talk about the triple bottom line. I'm not sure if you've ever...
Yeah.
Like similar concepts, but how does the ecosystem or the world, or however big you want to blow that concept out, how do they all benefit? Society, environmental, economics. Because the reality is that if you get that right, retention and acquisition and customers and growth and then shareholders, they are the outcome. They are always the intention, of course, because we want to provide that. But that doesn't mean you have to build a business that is destruction by nature to be able to achieve that. And like I said before, I think that the businesses of the future will have a locked-in outcome that is set in stone in some ways. And we're seeing a little bit of this happen. The Unilever is a great example, but Patagonia is another incredible example, whereby you effectively now have a locked-in profit model for the planet. And some of that is the business models that I think through and use and try to articulate in a way that could potentially change the way that we fund medical research in this country as well. Because if we have going concern businesses who turn our attention to us, then we have longer-term sustainable revenue, because the outcomes for medical research is experiments that they can't transact. That's their product. Whereas the outcome from an organisation is a commodity that they can sell, and they can generate revenue, and hopefully they've got some profit and they can build that back into their business. Whereas we have to be able to generate revenue.
What's going concern business that turns its attention to us? What does that mean?
Well, I think that's the businesses today that haven't quite got that version of triple bottom line or otherwise available to their market, and are not quite optimising the fact that they generate revenue, but that the upside is, if we get this bit right, everyone wins. And it's difficult, particularly in my world, which is the element of the very difficult disease that is low incidence but high mortality. So not many people get it. Lots of people die from it, and there's not a lot that can be done. It's difficult to really attract that. But I think that's the willing fight that I'm in, is to change that narrative to say we are a business worth investing in. There is an opportunity for these going concern businesses and large corporates and otherwise to kind of catalyse their potential market and, direct it towards us, and we can have some value back to that because we have a considerable market share in terms of the hearts and minds of people in this country via the way in which we've set up our business. So that's the quid pro quo too. Like, the charities can exist in a way that actually isn't just about having your hand out. It's about what role do we play for you?
A well-known example of that, Australian cricket and the McGrath Foundation.
Yeah.
Is that
Yep.
a for-profit company partnered with a charity, and it's a win-win?
Finding an opportunity to hero the cause in a way that is built into your customer base and your core business. It's not separate to, it's not just a donation, because beyond the donation, there's so much depth. There's the real magic in those partnerships that then has seen the McGrath Foundation just continually succeed and get opportunities with other partners. And that's an incredible example of partnership. Probably the next phase to that is, like I've said, the businesses of the future actually accessing that in their foundational kind of their forming stage. The reality is that I think we need a considerable part of the world, but the Australian market, to adopt those elements of things that are like that genuine partnership, which makes sense to the customer. There's an incredible outcome that everyone can celebrate. And in that, everyone grows.
Porter out of Harvard said that this is how we're going to solve all the problems of the world, is when businesses turn their core purpose and their primary intent towards solving a problem.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And the Patagonia example, to come back to that, is probably the example of the last decade where they have achieved that, for all intents and purposes. The impact and the outcomes are still to be measured in terms of what that has done, and that will happen over 10 and 20 and 30 years. But what an extraordinary opportunity for a business to then re-engage their customer base based on that purpose that goes well beyond profit. It actually includes profit, but it goes well beyond it. And that's so exciting. And I talk about the reality of current business, but also current wealth solving the problems of the world. The reality is that our causes they're not often cause related, if that makes any sense, or they're not often causational. It's a pitch problem. It's, have we got the right pitch to the right people that doesn't just say, I've got a really difficult disease with a statistic that's really sad. It's, I have a disease that is difficult, has not changed. Here's our strategy to impact that disease over time. Here's what we require. Here's what we're going to give you. Let's build the strategy together. It's possible. And that's the bit that I stay in, or try to stay in.
That's a whole different approach to philanthropy. That's two organisations coming together to solve a business solution for each other, the outcome of which is that, a charity gets supported and a problem gets solved. That's a different way to your point, the handout charities perhaps of the yesteryear.
Yeah. Imagine if you mandated this, right? Imagine if, this will never happen, but let's toss it around for a second. But you said that every company on the ASX had to have a percentage profit contributed to Australian charities. I don't even know what that number is, because I just thought of that as an example. But that would be extraordinary. And what an extraordinary benefit. And then we would have incredible businesses working with that skill-based asset mindset to invest in other businesses to solve incredible problems that affect us all. Homelessness, food security, in my case, medical research. The wealth of knowledge that those people have in businesses to grow business could be turned immediately to building strategies to solve problems. You take my world of brain cancer research and think, how big's the problem and how big can it be? And well, the reality is if we were to achieve this kind of scenario and build sustainable revenue into our strategy and partner it with philanthropy and charity, because people will always want something to do. The reality is that if you came up with a drug or a therapeutic option that solved DIPG in kids in Australia, the disease isn't different in America, or it's the ultimate scalable product. that's a far too simplified version of getting access to the FDA and
Not at
PGA
all.
and everything
Not at
else.
all.
But thinking through simple, big problems like that is, of course, it's ultimately leverageable all over the world. It's scalable, and someone could, or a company or a person could solve this forever. Now, it would take 20, it'll take 30, it'll take 40 years. But breast cancer used to be this. Our diseases that we now survive and thrive through, and far too many people die of breast cancer and other cancers, but anything that we have comes because there was capital injected, we grew a problem, we understood it, and all over the world we're able to contribute to it.
Yeah. And that's where Australia, being a small market and being so innovative, if we can sort it out locally, then to your point, it can be eminently scalable.
Yeah, and I think this is probably back to the idea of community and connection, and this idea of Australia being a small market until you try and drive to Wagga or or anywhere else in the country. It's not that small. But we have by way of, I think, our culture and our nature, we are connected. We're prepared to connect. And so we will do things as a national collaborative in order for that to happen. And we have an environment that is rich in innovation and open to, entrepreneurship in most ways, particularly in medical research, where we can deliver clinical trials in a really innovative way. Speed to market is our opportunity in medical research because we don't have the insurance paradigms of America and all those sorts of things. We can play a really significant role in my world, and I'm sure in other worlds. And I'm sure agriculture is part of that as well.
I've heard that coined as fractal theory, and that's the little bit of broccoli is exactly the same as the bigger bit of broccoli. It's just a scaled up version of the small bit.
Yeah, it. Yep.
And if you can get it right in one business, then you can franchise that globally. It's the same construct, isn't it? That if we can solve this problem at a local level, then anything's possible. Hey, we need to crack on. I kind of wanted to explore your whole career, but I'm mindful of time. Can we jump to Director and General Manager of Carrie's Beanies for Brain Cancer Foundation and your role as CEO of the Brain Cancer Centre? What were you doing with Cotton On Group, and then how did you meet Carrie? Is that a reasonable place to start, Sam?
Yeah, it is. And the Cotton On Group is an incredible example of some of the ways in which I think now privately owned with an incredible philanthropic division that was built over time, not necessarily based on market factors. With a retail business, you would probably think would build a charity based on what might be its risk profile, which for retailers would be the factory environment. But that wasn't the way that the owner, the Austin family, wanted to approach it. This was built at this human level where he came up with a relationship and they started to invest in schools in Uganda. And so the Cotton On Foundation, where I was based, was this philanthropic heartbeat of this billion-dollar business. And I loved that because it showed me that you could operate a business for core business, and core business was retail and fashion and trade, but that this part that I worked in was so inextricably linked and connected to all of those parts of the business that we grew this entity within the Cotton On Group that was a multi-million-dollar charity sitting within a business that was a global enterprise. And so my role as a number of roles, but effectively global operations and national projects, was how do we engage 35,000 people across the world who are our team to access 1 million customers to help us achieve our strategy. And so that was very dynamic and led to some really extraordinary experiences.
How do you do that? How do you mobilise a team of that scale to get something like that done? And what was your part in that, Sam?
So we had lots of this, which again, so much of this relates to farming and agriculture, but which is the discipline every day to do the thing that is going to cut through. Now, from our perspective, constant communication, scaled communication, both globally and regionally relevant was most important, was our everyday discipline. 50% of our work was based on how can we communicate in country, in teams, into stores in a way that people will engage with, understand, and see as relevant. So we had a number of different processes that did that, some of which was to lean into the growing element of social media and this instantaneous connection we all now have, and that's been a bigger part of that business going forward. But the key part is really in the storytelling. What action are we trying to get people to take, and what story through what story are we asking them to contribute? Now ours was an emotional story. Ours was a heart story. It was young children in Uganda without medical, without education, without opportunity, without a future, and the provision and the proof that we could do that differently if we invested in them, and we had outcomes that showed that we could do that. It was incredible. So the storytelling was the big part, as it is in anything that we want to do in life, whether it's engaging, our farms and selling our products internationally, if we're doing that, or engaging people in to come and help support from a staffing perspective or at a community level. The storytelling is the key thing. We had a pretty easy story to sell, but it was still packaged up in a way that needed to be relevant to someone who sits in a store in Santa Monica and wanted to engage the customers in, would you buy this bracelet? I still wear them today. Would you buy this bracelet in store for $1 and contribute to our charity? Now, that mechanism, that very small business model, yielded $15 million, $16, $20 million a year in terms of charitable contributions that we could make to our strategy. That revenue stream, that secured revenue stream, was just extraordinary. And the impact that business is having globally is seriously underplayed by them and not undervalued internally, but it is extraordinary.
But that's having a communication method that inspires that casual retail staff member to use that script in Canada today to help solve a social problem.
To solve a problem they may never experience. Too. That they may never see, that they may never interact with. And so the beauty in this strategy was, and Nigel was incredibly good at this, was that, okay, that worked for a period of time, and like everything, how do we evolve it? So what started to happen is that the person in America started to say, awesome, love that, but we have this really incredible migrant problem here that needs supporting. How do we do that? So we evolved our business into this two-step model, this idea of international contribution to problems that we wanted to solve, education in Uganda, and contributing to where we lived and worked. So where our people were, we started to take on this idea of, we can do both. How do we solve and contribute to some problems that are relevant for you on your doorstep, which built engagement and built an incredible sense of contribution and connection, because they could tell that story through, we know what's happening down the road and we're also contributing here and we understand our purpose.
So, Sam, communication is a challenge for farming families, and through good proactive communication comes strong family and team alignment, and there's a real lack of that in a lot of farming families. Having helped such a big organisation communicate well on a global basis, what would be your tip for that family farmer with one or two employees that might not have their communication as frequent, as professional, as eloquent as it might be?
Yeah, I said it already, but the reality of being disciplined to the reality that you have to, in order to build engagement, you have to be communicating. And I don't care what it is, but you must be disciplined to the way in which that goes out. It's better if people can predict it. So if they know at Tuesday at 9:00 I get a message through that's the update from last week, and ours was a charity ratio that talked about my store, like my involvement in that, that's perfect. Not always achievable, but timed, specific, and disciplined communication is the key. Even if you have nothing to talk about, the reality of communicating anything, any update, any movement, anything, that it is gold, because we love consistency.
We coach our members around 2 days off farm annual planning, a quarterly planning meeting day to plan the next quarter, then weekly meetings to hold people accountable to the quarterly, maybe a daily huddle. But if those things are done consistently and at the same time, I guess there's that concept that frequency of interaction trumps quality of interaction. So I just love the way you framed that it's about just being, it doesn't have to be great. It's just got to be consistent.
Yeah. And the careful part, I guess, being, and we do this in meetings in corporate all the time. Well, we had a half-hour meeting, so we have to stay for half an hour. No, you don't. We had a half-hour meeting so that we could check in and go, we have a space to connect. Are we good? Is there anything we need to talk about? Here's my 2 points. It's going to take 5 minutes. If we're done in 5 minutes, move off onto the next thing because we're all busy. Yeah, but it's still the discipline to do it. Still the discipline to find it. And then if necessary, the magic of connection being that we build rapport off the back of that. Far be it for us to discuss strategy and then not to go, hey, what's happening at home? Are you okay? Is family okay? Sport? Oh, your sister broke her leg last week. Is mum okay? That's where the other magic can happen, the human element.
Disciplined people doing disciplined action. That's a Jim Collins construct, isn't it? Good to great.
Yeah, good to great. Yeah, which was that's so funny you mentioned that, but that was a Cotton On hero and must read, basically, on induction was the Jim Collins story.
If you haven't read Good to Great, recommend it highly.
Yeah, if you're looking for entrepreneurship meets connection and understanding why you're doing the work you're doing, it's an incredible read.
So, Sam, from Cotton On into Beanies for brain cancer and the Brain Cancer Centre, how did you come into that?
Well, like most good things in life, it was organic and unplanned. I was working at Cotton On at the time, met Carrie because we had asked her to be involved in a particular campaign. And thankfully, she accepted the meeting, number one. But number two, she had an ulterior motive, which we didn't and weren't aware of, in that she'd just started this idea of a Beanies campaign. And so in that meeting, she agreed to help us. And I said, look, I'd love to take on board that idea of supporting you with the Beanies campaign personally. I could just see that it was small and pure. And I could also see that with her, she wasn't looking for it as a way to amplify her message or to build her credibility or to grow her profile. She'd already achieved everything you could achieve. It was this firebrand intention to change the status quo that I was immediately attracted to, and that she had an opportunity to utilize this currency of celebrity, if you like, in a new way. And so that lit me up immediately. And then working with her over time, we've been able to build, strategize, and create the connections that allowed us to really seriously take this idea of selling a product for purpose in a beanie, of which there are other examples nationally, but we took it to new heights, certainly in terms of brain cancer. And we established some campaigns that generated $4 and $5 million of revenue over a period of 24 hours, 48 hours, engaging half of the country in terms of eyeballs and transactions at hundreds of thousands of units. It was extraordinary because the power of storytelling that she had at that time and that she still has, that opportunity to engage customers at an emotional level, but then importantly, take it to hope really quickly, take it to action. We have since that moment raised $27 million, $26.5 million for our cause. It's been 10 years since she made that Logie speech that people may remember her for, that really highlighted her journey, but also her role as an ambassador for this cause. And so since raising $27 million, what happened in the middle there was that we found it difficult to place that money into medical research in a way that made sense. So I'll draw the lines between my two worlds at that point. Was the Cotton On group. I had Nigel Austin asking me how many eggs I was giving to school children in Uganda and what role that played to our strategy, the overall business, which was at that point was to make a positive difference in the world. That was the vision of the business. So you've got this person who is incredibly driven asking me why the amount of eggs I'm giving isn't good enough to be able to affect our vision. That's how closely he saw those two things. Yet on the other side of my business, I had a charity contributing money to medical research projects, but not being able to align those projects, not being able to get them to talk to each other and to figure out where the collaborative magic was going to be, where the leverage was. So we stopped granting money for a period, which was a really risky strategy because our books, or the charity's books, unlike a farmer's books, is public facing. Every year we get audited. You can look up our P&L from every single year since when we started, as you can for any charity in the country. And so we grew some balance sheet asset through which to be able to make a big play. And the big play for us was to invest in this idea of the Brain Cancer Centre. So in 2021, we made our swing at a home run, which was to invest a considerable capital pool into one institute, the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute in Melbourne, but really importantly, under the understanding and this principled nature of generosity, which was, we know that no one institute will solve this. We want to invest in a strategy that will fund work at other institutes directly without the link to IP or commercialisation, fundamentally fund other projects. And that is incredibly unique in the Australian landscape. And so thankfully, this idea of generous leadership from the Walter and Eliza Hall has perpetuated out to us not only reinvesting extra capital of our own, so we've invested about $15 million into untied funds and research projects, but that has leveraged onto other funding, other mechanisms that's yielded another $45 million. So we have this pool and this ecosystem of research and clinical trials now where my job as a person who does not understand research, as a non-academic, is to bring together the key resources to ensure that they have an opportunity. The discipline from my communication is the opportunity to connect, to talk about the research, to talk about the technologies that they can share, to figure out where the gaps are, to reduce duplication, and to ensure that at some point we are all still working towards one vision, because I don't care who wins. I don't fly the flag of an institute, I fly the flag of a brain cancer patient, and they need progress. So if we build our strategy on that and not on an institutional kind of bias or a particular technology or overinvest in something, we can establish the kind of the base that is going to take us forward. That's my work today.
Has it been a bit disparate and a bit disorganised? I can imagine that fundraising for research is a boom bust kind of thing, and people are in their own lanes and I'd imagine you've got really smart people trying to spend a lot of their time and energy trying to raise money to do their next piece of research. And what was the problem practically and kind of then practically too? How are you solving? Like how does all this work? Can you just kind of explain it a bit more?
The way in which discovery happens today in Australia is, for the most part, a researcher needs to apply to the Australian government through two mechanisms, two pools of funding, which we provide, our taxes pay for, but are opportunities to apply for grant funding. The reality is that every researcher in the country who works on anything to do with medical research has to apply for that, through which to be able to sustain their salary, the salaries of their postdoctoral researchers, and to effectively work on the problem. Now, the reality is that as a small incidence cancer in brain cancer, there are not many people who are working on brain cancer in the country. So therefore, there are very few people applying for that funding. Therefore, you do very little work. So the problem is twofold. One, not enough people working on the problem applying for grants, but really importantly, the opportunity to actually win that grant, the chance of winning that grant that gets to sustain your work is about 1 in 10. It's probably lower, to be honest. As a way of defining that, a researcher might spend an entire month of their work working on a paper, a grant to submit to an agency through which to be able to generate their research. There are 1 in 10 shot to get to it, so 10% chance. There's no way a farmer in the country would think that that's a good deal or a good investment of their time and energy. And not only that, we have the smartest people in the country spending a month of their time writing grants and not solving the problem and doing the experiments. And
that's the problem, right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then overlay that with the element of researchers are desperate to connect and desperate to share, and they're incredibly generous. And for the most part, so are institutions. But the system is built around the idea that I have to have my ideas and they have to be unique. And therefore, I can't talk to you, Jeremy, about my ideas, even though we're working on this altruistic kind of idea of solving a problem of brain cancer. Yet, for all intents and purposes, we could be working on really similar things, or we could be working in complementary things that could help each other. But the difficulty in terms of talking to each other is overlaid by commercialization and intellectual property and all of these market factors that have been built into this idea of medical research when we're actually solving and trying to make discoveries that save our lives. And that's the bit that I think people would go, how did we build it like that? Lots of different factors.
But it's like a rose bush, isn't it? If you let it just grow organically, it becomes a mess at some point. You've got to kind of prune it back and reorganise it a bit, haven't you?
And look, let's be honest, it has provided significant discoveries over time. So it has worked.
Yeah.
It has also and does legitimise the fact of rewarding high-level science. Our position within the brain cancer space is probably more that works if you're in a population cancer kind of level. If you've got lots of people bidding for the research, lots of competitive kind of engagement, but you miss the opportunity for small groups of researchers to make progress. And so what the BCC, what the Brain Cancer Centre tries to do is to give a consistent amount of funding to an incredibly collaborative group of people across the country through which to sustain their individual businesses, to build early data on some of their hypotheses, or to fund the high-risk opportunity that they think might turn into a clinical trial, and then to connect those things together, plus work with the best in the world to make progress.
And get our researchers not having to waste time fundraising because you're making the funds available.
Look, as a secondary strategic intent, it is to significantly up the perceptive value of research, because we see a lot. I was talking about storytelling before. We see a lot of the clinician at the bedside, at the patient. And that is an easy visualization to make. That clinician, and the nurses, they do incredible work. What we don't see is the young, incredibly smart young person who sits at a lab bench watching a petri dish full of cancer cells grow in a particular way that expresses a particular protein that they have an idea they might be able to put a target towards 20 years before that actually turns into the drug that goes into the patient that we see at the bedside. Young, smart people go to work every day to save our lives and create discoveries to save our lives in institutes around the country. And I don't think we see that. I have this bullish kind of desire to upload, to make rock stars out of them, to actually talk about how incredible they are.
Sam, I'm going to throw 4 questions for you in one. Ready? So what was the problem that Carrie wanted to solve? What does Beanies for Brain Cancer kind of deliver and achieve? How long has the Brain Cancer Centre been in existence, and what have you seen it achieve so far?
Great questions. I'll go quick fire at them. Carrie wanted to do nothing other than, first of all, to raise awareness. She wanted to put that beanie on, and if you haven't seen her Logie speech from 10 years ago, Google it, or we can put it in show notes or something, but it's 3 minutes of incredibly authentic storytelling based on lived experience, and she wanted people to recognise that this thing existed, first and foremost. Then as you grow out a little bit and there's constant inquiry, she wanted to raise $1 million. That is what she thought was an extraordinary outcome of her celebrity involvement in this. Fast forward 10 years and she has won the hearts and minds of the country in terms of this idea of brain cancer research, along with some significant others, we'll say, some other incredible organisations, and raised $27 million, which is absolutely amazing. The second question is CB for BC, Carrie's Beanies for Brain Cancer, does 2 things. One, it stays true to that idea of raising awareness of the problem and telling stories of brain cancer patients and why we need to help. But it also provides an opportunity for people to do something. If you purchase a beanie from one of our campaigns or you contribute to our cause, mostly you get a product for that and you can represent that and create that ambassadorship that is putting the beanie on and wearing it around your local community and having conversations about it. But you also know you're making an incredible contribution to a cause that has generated significant fundraising over time. The BCC started in 2021, and over 4 years, it is truly hard to describe how significant this organisation is. And in no part that is a reflection on me, but it is a reflection of the amount of goodwill and cultural buy-in that we've been able to achieve from researchers across the country. This thing, this little ecosystem, this little engine that could kind of, is doing things that are the first in the world. You know, we have a clinical trial platform based in Melbourne that is the first of its kind in the world and has launched and will launch more clinical trials that is based on this idea of drug discovery, drug penetration, multiple surgeries, screening across different surgeries to understand whether a drug has an on-target effect. It is absolutely the most incredible thing, and we will launch a clinical trial in a few months' time that Australia will hear and know and find out about, and it will be the biggest thing in brain cancer research and clinical trials in the world at the time that we launch it. And that is all because a person with a celebrity audience decided to put on a beanie 10 years ago and it's an act of service, right? Give that moment to a cause that she cared about. She didn't want to thank her agent or her partner, or she said, you know what, for this moment, it's going to exist outside of me. It's bigger than me. And because of that, the butterfly effect is these opportunities we get to engage in patients and engage in clinical trials and do the work. Now, the hard part about that is people are diagnosed today. People are diagnosed tomorrow. And the reality is that we sell this message of hope because that's really the currency we've got. We have to continue to push forward aggressively with this idea of our vision of one day, no lives lost to brain cancer. But the people who are in that fight today, sometimes that's difficult to hear because the hope is it's A, it's not promised, and B, it's on a time frame which is difficult for them to see them benefiting from. And that is a real challenge that I deal with on a weekly basis where there'll be a frustrated parent with a daughter who's dying of DIPG, a shocking form of cancer, who will be frustrated naturally that we have not been able to do more, or that we have purported to be making all of this progress, yet we haven't achieved A or B or C, or that we can't get his daughter on a clinical trial. It's that's the hard part, you know.
Early days though, isn't it? Like, this is your 5th year for the Brain Cancer Centre.
Yeah.
What would the researchers sitting at that desk looking at the Petri dish, what would they say about the impact that the Brain Cancer Centres had for their ability to get on and make progress?
Oh, it's incredibly heartwarming to be able to sit down with a researcher now, and particularly those who have ridden the wave either side, because you've got these new PhD students who come into this idea of the Brain Cancer Centre and are heavily then invested in the idea of generous culture and leadership of data and connection and community. But you've got the people the other side who spent 10 years in the wilderness kind of fighting on their own, who talk about this breadth, this capacity, this extra energy, this want to kind of fulfill the dream that is incredibly inspiring, because I only know a whisper of the amount of pain and suffering and turmoil and resilience that they had to show for the years beforehand with which to be able to achieve this space now. And they're really driving that now. They're driving the idea of we have an opportunity, we have a connected group of researchers who can achieve something. Let's get up and go is kind of our motto. And it's incredible.
Sam, what you've created and the way you're creating that collaboration within the brain cancer research community, is that a unique model compared to the way that other illnesses, other charities are functioning? And then second question, we talk about big, hairy, audacious goals. We get our farmers to kind of set them down.
That's a Jim Collins too.
Bingo. Yeah. What is the BHAG that you and Carrie and your team kind of have for where this could go?
Yeah. So to answer the first part, which is the uniqueness or otherwise, having done a measure of due diligence around this, but we want to spend as much time as we can on building our plane and flying it at the same time. I haven't seen anything that is similar to this in this country, and that's not saying there's not incredible charities that are contributing to medical research. The Mark Hughes Foundation is another extraordinary charity that may be familiar to some of your farmers, particularly in the New South Wales region, who do incredible work in a similar way, but we certainly exist in a very unique space. And I'm really proud of that in terms of forcing the idea of collaborative investment in institutions not totally used to behaving in that way. And they have seen significant benefit from that as well, which I'm really pleased to be able to start to see the green shoots of a faith-based game, which was to invest in other institutions' outcomes, because the rising tide is just starting to get above the high water mark and lift us all up a little bit.
And is it business and corporates and families and others? Like, are you driving partnerships into commerce to help you get this done?
A little bit. And what we have tried to do is be really bullish about the idea that we needed to figure out what our strategy was, where our strengths were, and where we could play first. And the second part of our strategy is to take that not just a vision, not just an idea, but a business model and a going concern organisation, and offer it to the public as a chance to scale. If you want to invest in this idea of a legacy issue that can be solved over time, because we have shown that it can be solved, cancer is solvable, that's what we want to do now, the second phase. So we've been really, really intentional in terms of ensuring that we wanted to make sure we understood our strengths first, that we knew where we were going and who wanted to play. who wanted to buy into this idea of generous sharing and culture, and because some don't, and that's okay. The reality of us going forward is, how do you create buy-in to the vision? And when you talk about big, hairy, audacious goals, ours is sustainable revenue, and sustainable by way of not having to sell a $30 beanie to a family that's probably already been impacted by brain cancer.
So sustainable revenue that can be gifted to the brain cancer centre so that researchers can get on with solving this problem.
Correct.
And
our
solving,
strategy exists in
beating brain
parts.
cancer.
Correct. Yeah. To allow young people to go to work to save our lives, create discoveries to save our lives. That's how I frame it.
What's the dollar amount that would be that income?
I don't think I've ever said it publicly or talked about it.
Do you know, or is it a growing thing?
We certainly know what we want to achieve, even though that what we want to achieve would it's a little bit like, how long is a piece of string? Because I talk about it in the ways that if someone with significant capital wanted to solve brain cancer, what would they do? So the poor example is, and I hope this never makes the paper, but what if Elon Musk got brain cancer? What would he do? He would put the most significant resources and attention, and he would recruit and he would fund the research that made progress happen. That's what it is. So the number is, well, when do you want to solve it? Because the number that you need to achieve that is directly in proportion to that outcome you're trying to achieve. The reality is, at the moment, we want to 5 times scale the amount of research that we're doing right now. And we think 5 times scale looks about like $10 million of available revenue, untied revenue to invest in our strategy.
Per year. Which is not a lot of money when you think about how much floats around, right?
No. So there are really clear examples of incredible contributions from families and businesses and corporations, and even overseas investment into Australia, where that kind of gift put to work in an investment strategy that's very clear can yield dividends that allow you to do that. And that's really what we're talking about, a business model where, say, a high net worth individual wouldn't necessarily need to give, in inverted commas, everything that they've ever worked hard towards achieving. Maybe there's an element of, how do we build the business model that allows for us to grow a portion of capital through which to be able to contribute towards this incredible problem over a period of time, and how do we lock that in for 20 years so we can actually make progress?
Sam, I'm going to be honest, I've never met someone with brain cancer, and I've never seen someone suffer through it. Can you just give me an insight? Tell me about this disease so that for people, me and others that haven't been exposed to it, we get a sense of what it is.
Yep. It is 1,900 people a year get brain cancer. 80% of them won't survive 5 years. So the 5-year survival rate is 21%. So you get to that point where that hasn't changed since records began, effectively. And I'll give you another stat that is also awful, that this is the biggest killer of kids in the country, the disease that takes more kids than any other. And that I think is a bit of a shock to people. But that's because this is a difficult cancer. It exists in the brain. It makes up who we are, how we love, how we remember, how we focus on the future, how we show up for everybody every day. And of course, in being where it is, it has these extra effects that kind of I hear people talk about, particularly as people who are similar to you and I, the 30s, 40s, 50s, in a couple of kids, and who say, well, it took the person before it took the person because of where it is. So they're really difficult. But the 5-year survival rate is one thing. The reality of people not having the hope with therapeutic outcomes that have happened for other cancers is the other thing. But particularly for kids, it is one of the last cancers where on diagnosis you are 100% terminal, palliative effectively. Neil Armstrong's daughter was diagnosed in 1961, I think, of a disease called DIPG, a brain tumour, which will be relevant, I'm sure, to one of your listeners or some of your listeners. It's diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. It's a child brain cancer that grows right at the base of the brain stem, so is inoperable and is effectively untreatable, and lots of times can't even biopsy it. So the thing that most parents will say to me, and what I've heard constantly from those parents has been that the oncologist will say to them, your daughter or your son has a DIPG, you have this amount of time, there's nothing we can do, you need to go home and make memories, because there isn't a treatment paradigm that is going to provide significant outcomes for your child. There are things we can do, but it's not going to help. So I think it's the lack of hope in that diagnosis that really is the part that I can't wrap my head around. And the reality of that happening to young people, our children, and us not making progress, the same treatment paradigm offered to Neil Armstrong's daughter in 1961 is the same treatment paradigm we offer to kids now with DIPG. I give you another one that it cost, I think, around $331 million to put a man on the moon in 1969, which Neil Armstrong did for us all, for humankind, for mankind. If you extrapolated that out now, and I'm sure he was wondering, well, you can put me on the moon, why can't we do this? Why can't we solve this for my daughter? But that'd be something like, $1 billion now. If we had that kind of investment, in 10 years' time, we would have therapeutic outcomes that work against this disease. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We are about to solve cervical cancer in this country. Here first, cervical cancer will be eradicated. It'll be a thing of the past. That is mind-blowing, right?
Where was that 20 years ago?
Well, exactly. It was in the minds and hearts of a young person who turned up at a lab and said, you know what, I think we can do this. And it progressed to the point where we will have an effective vaccination against it. Now, prostate cancer still takes far too many people, but it used to take our fathers and our sons at an alarming rate in the 60s and 70s. We now have these multimodal therapies of great surgery, of early detection, of drug treatments that can allow you to outlive it. It's not like cancer can't be solved. I talk a lot about the road travelled in discovery. We're not trying to do the impossible. We're trying to gather up a relevant and vibrant and engaged group of researchers to make discoveries to take us down that road. And we need the resources to be able to help deliver that strategy over time.
Sam, I just want to say congratulations for kind of creating the model and the context and the premise around which our researchers around this can get the funding and then collaborate together to kind of get it done. I think you're probably your team and with your leadership, I think you're exponentially speeding up the way in which we're going to get an outcome, which is incredible.
Yeah, and I hope so, and I really appreciate that, Jeremy. It really is a collaborative. So I'm here and I'm having this conversation, but it really does exist in all parts in collaboration, because it might surprise many people to know that CB for BC, our charity, is a two-person, only one full-time organisation. It's as lean and as mean as it comes. The Brain Cancer Centre spends very little of its money outside of direct investments on research. So you kind of need the idea of this altruistic, which is why I'm very vision focused, which is why it's about no lives lost to brain cancer. That's our vision. It determines and demands that we make progress. It doesn't say we're just going to cure it. It says we have to fight for this every step of the way. So being a part of that, playing a role within that is the greatest privilege of my career. And I'm in the privileged position to be able to talk about it and represent people who really do go to work to make discoveries to save our lives.
It's also an amazing reminder of what one person can inspire and create, in Carrie with your direct support, Sam. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that. And maybe the lesson and the message in that is that finding your people or finding people who can help you is always a great idea, no matter what you're doing. You have at your disposal hundreds of people who may be able to help you. Who can you find in your network that can take you forward, to take your cause forward, or to take your issue on board?
Just occurred to me, looping right back to the start of this conversation, you talked about your father and the neighbour's tractor. Farmers, when there is a fire or a flood or adversity, we're a fragmented bunch and we do a lot on our own and we're all isolated and doing our own thing. But when there's a need to come together to get around a problem, I don't think there's a better community than a farming community to actually come together to support that family having a tough time or to respond and bounce back from an adversity. I didn't expect to ask you this, but if there was a request or a way in which that this national farming community could come together to kind of help you and Carrie solve this problem, what would be your unreasonable request of farmers, and how would you sort of shout out to them to maybe get round this and treat it like the local fire?
Yeah, I love that idea. Sophie, my wife, and I talk a lot about if you've got a problem, you want to be in a small community, because a particularly farming community, because they would never let you down. And so I guess the request, unless there is a closet billionaire in your listenership that is prepared to have a conversation about how to create legacy shifting and paradigm shifting investment in brain cancer research, that would be the completely unreasonable request. My door is always open and I'm available on LinkedIn. But I guess maybe the unreasonable request is, and all I can ask is for people to dive into our ecosystem to understand what this thing looks like and to understand what our vision is in building a strategy towards it, not just having a sad cause that we need to raise funds for. This is about we're raising money on one side of our ecosystem and we're investing it on the other side, and we're going as hard as we possibly can at the idea of a vision where no lives are lost to brain cancer. And if that inspires you such, the ability to contribute to our cause is that's where the end game is. In some way, shape or form, reality of contribution to our cause is incredibly valuable and we're incredibly grateful for it.
Thanks, Sam. I mean, we've got small family farms and corporates in our industry, and we've got a massive supply chain that sits on top of the farmers to actually get it to market and get it done. And a shout out to the agribusinesses in the supply chain too, that this could be a social project that you align your brand to and that you throw your support behind. So,
and from that point of view, we as I said in the middle of our discussion, we are a charity very conscious of our responsibility to provide an asset. And we have a really significant asset through which to be able to make those conversations real win-win. We have access to 1 million customers across the country in varied forms who are incredibly engaged with our cause, who often have lived experience, but also are really conscious of the idea of charity and contribution and ways to be able to do that, innovative, new, fresh, fun ways to do that, because it's called fundraising for a reason. It's supposed to be fun, They're the great conversations that really lift everyone up. And then we don't have to, because our community doesn't want to just exist in the statistic either. They don't want to talk about children dying or people under 40 or lack of therapeutic options. They want to talk about action and hope and fundraising and contributing to a charity and hearing about the research. And filling that cup is very important.
Sam, I'll share how people can do their research and learn more in the show notes, 100%. Hey, one more conversation. I'm mindful of time. Can you just tell us about your trip to Africa and you and Tommy Little and Carrie Bickmore and Ned Brockman and I think Trent Cochin and his wife and yourself and what's it called? The Big Six or something?
The Big Five.
The Big Five. Can you just tell us, what an achievement. Congratulations. But can you just give us an insight as to what you've just achieved?
Yeah, I will from both perspectives, the strategy behind it and why, but then the beautiful human outcome that was achieved. So, the strategy is, and people will relate to this, I think, in terms of Carrie, and she has existed in part as an ambassador of the cause for 10 years. She's been living it for 15 years and more, over 25 years through her husband's illness. And that's, that audience has probably heard as much as anyone about this disease and what it does. So we sat down in our annual planning to talk about the campaigns that we would deliver and how we would deliver them. And I came up with the idea of, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. If your listeners are familiar with that, throw a bunch of celebrities into one space. But it does have this connection to charity, this thin connection to charity for each of them. So I thought, why would we not flip that on its head? Because we need access to new audience, and we want to be able to promote the fact that we have a charity that's doing good and a research ecosystem that can win, but we need access to new audience. So we went out to some friends and some people that we knew with other profiles and said, would you like to come to Africa with us to run a marathon in the middle of a safari park that includes the Big Five, and would you do it raising money for our cause? And so a few said, well, are you sure? A few said yes immediately, and everything in between. And so the group, Trent and Brooke of AFL fame and incredibly just beautiful people, took it on straight away, and they trained for it, and they went out to their audience and they talked about what and why they were involved and what they needed to do. And Trent, I only found out, having known Trent for 5 or 6 years, I only found out through this campaign that he had an experience with a brain tumour, a pituitary gland tumour that is benign and stable, but he has that. And so it was really interesting to watch that kind of come out of him and all of these beautiful human stories. But through the access to that network, we were able to both significantly increase the idea of what we're trying to do, which is advance the cause. And also we were able to raise $1.2 million through 15 people going on this wild adventure. And now that the idea of the Big Five is important and strategic. One, it's unique in that people couldn't believe we were running through a safari park with lions and elephants, and I should name the Big Five: lions, elephants, buffalo, leopard, hippo.
I'm just going to jump in. Ned Brockman said it was the toughest run he's ever done.
Correct. Yeah,
and
so
he got the record, right?
Course record, broke his foot halfway through, and he has not done anything harder. And that's a guy who knows what hard is like.
How hard was it, Sam, for you?
Oh, it was absolutely brutal. 26 Ks of soft sand running. You had to climb 1,300 metres. All of that was in a 3K section that was probably at the 50-degree angle mark. That's after you'd completed 26 Ks of sand running. It was merciless. But it was also disarming, because for a lot of it, you're running in a safari park where you know what's available around you. And so it had this interesting kind of safety and build up of it. Just had everything. It had the works. But then to finish with the euphoria, and what I think was noticeable was the effort. And I go back to effort with my dad and the resilience to get through. We had people who were not going to get through that event, who should not have gotten through that event. Isaac Smith, who's an AFL player for those who are listening, who took on his task from Scott Selwood, who had to pull out due to the passing of his twin brothers, was a beautiful story in and of itself. He had 3 weeks of training, and I found him 28 Ks into this climb and suffering, really suffering, to the point where I left him with a paramedic. And his final words to me as I darted off, because I had to go and see other people and finish, he said, "Don't worry, Sammy, I'll get to the finish line." And I get to the end and I race back, trying to get hold of a radio on the way. And where's Isaac Smith? Where is he on the course? Someone said, no, he left the paramedic station 15 minutes ago. He's back out running. Now, this was a person who was not supposed to be. Like, the effort, the incredible human effort to get over the line and then to celebrate that with the community was extraordinary. So powerful.
I think your comment just there speaks to just your selflessness and your humility, that you quietly said, oh, yeah, I finished, and then went back to check on him. Like, mate, you went a long way back after you'd completed that huge challenge to get your arm around him and carry him over the finish line. And for me, what a great way perhaps to wrap up this conversation, mate. But that just speaks to your character and your grit and your determination. And no doubt that's at the heart of the Beanies for Kate. The Beanies, I just got that wrong.
Beanies for brain cancer.
But, mate, congratulations. Yeah, well done. And, yeah, thank you for sharing. I hope this in some way just touches on your amazing work and the significant impact that you and your researchers and your team are having in a really important area of medical research.
Thanks, Jeremy. And I just really appreciate the chance to have an open discussion about it, because it's not often we take what's it been, an hour and a half and just lean into all of those concepts and take the chance to think through where they came from and why they're important, and the reality that I'm passionate about this cause is through other people. It is through families that I've connected with, through the privilege of watching researchers go to war against this thing every day, young, smart people who are the smartest people in the country, who don't get paid enough and don't get recognised enough, but they still do it through this kind of incredible curiosity of discovery that one day might lead to a new therapeutic option, and one day maybe I'm lucky enough to still be working in it, but maybe I'm not. But if I hear about that drug that is accessible to DIPG patients because of some of the work that we've done, I'll smile a very tearful but happy smile when one day that comes to fruition.
Hey, farmers, let's make brain cancer a local fire and get round this and get it sorted. I just, if this has resonated with you, let's throw our support behind Sam and Carrie and their great work. Sam, I often finish these podcasts with 2 questions, if I could.
Mm-hmm.
What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of the fact that I have a beautiful wife, my beautiful kids, that I have an extended family who I can call on at any point, that those relationships are near and dear, and I've held them through trials and tribulations, and that we are connected as a family unit more so than ever, and more every day. That is not, just a given. It's not easy, but to have that as my safety net and as my guiding star, I guess, if you like, is I'm so incredibly grateful for and proud of.
I know my brother Jono and my sister-in-law Sally, who's your wife's sister, your extended family are so proud of you, mate. It's just amazing what you're doing. My last question, mate, is what would you say to a younger you?
Oh, gee, another great question. I would say, you know what, it's used very often, but I do reflect on it a lot, is that I cared far too much what people thought when I was 16, 17, 18. I wish I was more me, unashamedly more me, and that knowing and trusting the fact that if I was more me, that would attract my tribe. I'd find my safety net. I would find my people, because in that there's a bit of purpose and a bit of the wise sort of 20 years of working in industry that has led me to be here, that you can trust your gut and your instincts and be who you are and still be successful. My 16-year-old version of myself was a confused, who do I have to hang out with? I hope they think about me this way. What do they think about? How, just so confused. I wish I had the clarity to go, it'll actually be okay. Just be you. You're actually really great as you. And it's something I tell my boys all the time.
What a great comment. I love that quote. And it was a key game changer for me, is what other people think of me is none of my business.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we could, and that's it's still a struggle to do that now, but at least the common sense, maybe the self-awareness to check yourself and go, actually, that's none of my business, nor does it help me, and nor does it attract what I need to attract in terms of whether that's business or other relationships. Keep pushing on, because you're okay.
That's a cracking comment.
I also love the other one, which is that, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
That you don't have to be an asshole to get what you want in life. The reality is that good things can still happen to good people, and that in that there is wealth and all of the things that will come with it. You can be a good person and still win.
Yeah. Well, I think I love play win-win, but make the first W about the other person.
Yeah, great. Yeah, absolutely. Love that. You should write a book. There's a coffee table book in this with some photos.
Hey, have you got that quote on your wall you mentioned before?
Yeah.
Do you mind finishing this podcast? Would you read that to us?
I will. And
is that okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's called The Man in the Arena. As I said, it is an excerpt from a very famous Theodore Roosevelt speech called The Citizen in the Republic. I think it was France in 1910 or something. But it says this: it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcomings, but who actually does strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
You're a fucking legend, Sam. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's a pleasure. Appreciate it.
There you have it, folks. I hope now you can appreciate what it is that makes Sam McGuane and his wife Sophie and their family so special, so passionate and so dedicated to solving a really significant problem. But for me, this whole conversation has just reminded me that sometimes we get so caught up just doing our job or making profit or providing for our families that we might forget that we can have a bigger impact on our friends, on our community, on a problem that we're passionate about. And perhaps we underestimate our skill as farmers in actually getting that done alongside what we do on farm. And Sam is just such an amazing human and great example of making a commitment to be in the service of others and to go after solving a significant problem. And in a short time with Carrie and others, they have absolutely exponentially scaled the speed with which we're going to solve brain cancer and end it as a terminal illness. Sam, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Wonderful to connect and can't wait to see you again soon. But to all of you, I guess it raises the question, is there a different or a bigger game that we might play as we go about all that we do on farm and in our communities and with our families? Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening, and bye for now. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Farmer podcast by Farm Owners Academy. If you're new to this show, be sure to follow us. If you've been a long-time listener, let your friends know about us or come continue the conversation in the Profitable Farmer Facebook group. All the best as you grow your business and create your freedom farm. Until next time, keep being incredible.